Good Monday morning. Welcome to Focus on the News. It is August 28th, 2023. Today, our principal topic is going to be GOP frontrunners want war on Mexican drug cartels. This is something we've discussed previously, and I'm not sure whether anyone had really advocated this prior to us. As far as I know, from all that I've read, we were the first quite some time ago, but it's now taken off. Before I get into that topic, though, I want to just touch briefly on the indictments against former President Trump. I think it's really important, just by way of background, for people to recognize the tremendous magnitude of the political corruption that's taken hold in our country. And I'm not talking about just all of the wheeling and dealing and payoffs and that kind of thing. I'm specifically talking about our election system. Now, we know that President Trump has been indicted 4 times, 4 different courts, federal courts, state courts. This very coordinated action designed to time all of these trials to where, at least in theory, unless we can get some relief perhaps from the Supreme Court, he's got to be flying all around here and there, this state, this District of Columbia, all of these different places, defending against these really bizarre charges. Some of them are so creative that it's not at all clear that they even allege actual offenses. But I want to put it in perspective, because you say, okay, well, there's some stuff. Maybe there's some stuff happening. Maybe he ought to be indicted for something. You need to understand the gravity of indicting a president of the United States, a former president, and perhaps a future president. I think you'd have to be crazy not to realize that these indictments are all timed and coordinated in order to make it as impossible as you can imagine for Donald Trump to run for president. So these aren't just things that in the due course of justice came up, but you've got them being orchestrated out of the Justice Department by an attorney general who is President Biden's right-hand man. So you got the president of the United States who is giving direction to the attorney general to coordinate all of this garbage that's going to make it possible to block his opponent from running for office. Now here, I'm going to give you some things that you can tuck away and realize the gravity of this thing. George Washington was the first president of the United States. He was inaugurated in 1789. Since that time, we have had 45 presidents. And this spans a period of 234 years, 45 presidents in that time. There have been 0 indictments of any of the other presidents during 234 years. It has never happened. There have been controversies around this one, that one. There has never been an indictment, because I think there was a realization that it is so politically damaging to bring legal action against the president of the United States that it undermines us. It undermines our country and its ability to function. Now, okay, so 45 presidents, 0 indictments. Here's what happens with Trump. Trump is impeached twice. He's impeached the second time when he isn't even in office, according to the Democrats. That he's, but they just rushed through sort of this kangaroo impeachment. It was bizarre, just so that they could put a marker down. Now, both of those impeachments, there was not a conviction in either one. So the President Trump was acquitted in both of the two impeachment. Then they followed on by 4 indictments. Now, they didn't do it just as soon as they had something they could work with. No, they some of these things were so creative that they're really sort of inventing sort of charges against him. This is the latest thing in Georgia. Now, that's in state court in Fulton County. It is the most Democrat place in all of the state of Georgia is in Fulton County. You can't, if you're a Republican, you're guilty. That's all. It doesn't matter in Fulton County. And in any event, the charge against him is so thin. Basically, they're saying, well, he made a phone call to the Attorney General of Georgia, and he asked him. He said, "Look," he said, with all of the allegations of fraud which were monumental in Georgia, by the way, that was probably ground zero, and with all of that stuff, he said, "Look," he said, "all we need is to find 11,000 of the votes that were fraudulent that we can kick out, and we'll take the state of Georgia." I think you've been crazy not to do that. I mean, you'd have to be a nutcase not to have made that phone call and said, "Hey, look, you got all this stuff going on. Can't you just find 11,000 fraudulent votes?" He's charged with that. He's charged with somehow, I don't know, it's some idea that he's interfering with election. No, candidates who do not get elected have a certain duty to make sure that the process was not corrupted, and he certainly had that duty. So it's a political prosecution. It doesn't have any substance at all. We've also got this guy Jack Smith, who is sort of running the show for the federal prosecutions, and it's really important to remember. Back in the days when Bob McDonnell was the governor of Virginia, very popular governor, so popular that the consensus within the Republican Party was that Bob McDonnell would be chosen as the next vice president of the United States. And so because of his prominent position in the Republican Party, his tremendous record as governor, Jack Smith brought charges against him. They were very odd charges. And eventually, those charges went up. And I talked with Bob. Bob he wasn't in my same political group. We were both Republicans, but we weren't in the same political, not on the same wavelength, but we were always cordial. I became close to Bob after he got in trouble because I called him. I said, "Bob," I said, "I have just represented a client where we had the exact issue of what are you able to do lawfully in terms of giving donations and somebody giving you some assistance with something that you're doing." And I said, "This has gone to the Supreme Court, Bob." I said, "If you ever get to the Supreme Court with this, you're going to win because it's cut and dry. That it doesn't matter. It's not a partisan issue at the court. They just recognize that people in office do favors for donors. You can't do a quid pro quo. In other words, you can't say, 'Okay, I'm going to give you so much money if you vote for this bill,' and then the official cannot say, 'Yes, you give me so much money and I will vote for the bill.' That's a crime. But the fact that somebody gives you a lot of money and then you answer the phone when they call and you try to do things that are helpful to them. That's just politics. And the Supreme Court recognizes it. In any event, when Jack Smith's prosecution of Governor Bob McDonnell got to the US Supreme Court, sure enough, they ruled against Jack Smith. They threw it out because it was an absolute farce. It was a political prosecution. And the Supreme Court voted 9-0. There was not a single person, not one of the Democrat appointees, not the most liberal member of the Supreme Court was willing to uphold the case against Bob McDonnell. So you can see the kind of prosecution you're getting. You're getting a guy who as a prosecutor is a political hitman. He's a hack who is, he's chosen because he'll go after and he'll prosecute, and he will, it doesn't matter whether the case ultimately stands on appeal, he will try to knock Donald Trump out of the race. Okay, so with that background, I'm going to get into our principal topic today. We just had the GOP presidential debate. Trump decided that he would do an interview with Tucker Carlson instead. I think he probably got a lot more viewers than all the others did. But in any event, it was still somewhat interesting to see what the others had to say. And one of the principal things that came out of it was that the GOP frontrunners made it clear that they want war against the Mexican drug cartels. And The Hill wrote a pretty good article on this, and it was entitled, "GOP Talk of Military Action in Mexico Sparks Dire Warnings." Now keep in mind, the Mexican drug cartels are one of the wealthiest enterprises on the planet. They kill over 100,000 Americans every year with fentanyl. They are behind the wave of the foreign invasion taking place across the American border, and they require people to pay. You don't just come across the border. You have to pay, and you can pay on credit, but you come into the country, and then you're sold to sex traffickers and that kind of thing. So there's kind of a form of involuntary servitude where people, the illegal aliens, come in here and they are beholden to the drug cartels. So the drug cartels are fabulously wealthy, and they channel a lot of that money indirectly to American politicians. And the American politician just kind of understand, if you want to go places in politics, you better not take on the cartels because they get all the money and they can make sure that your opponents are well funded. So it's kind of surprising that this has become a topic in the presidential debates. And the question came up about the U.S. taking military action in Mexico against the drug cartels. Now, the first person to raise this issue was Donald Trump, because he talked to the Secretary of Defense, Secretary Esper, who was kind of a wishy-washy liberal kind of individual, and he said, "Hey, look," he said, "we know where these drug lords are. You're giving me intelligence that says, so and so is located right here, right now. So why don't we just hit them with cruise missiles or something? Let's just take them out." And Esper was, "Oh my goodness gracious, the idea that we would kill a drug cartel leader." Now, we kill people all over the place. I mean, we are assassinating people. We're killing people all over in the Mideast, and certainly with what we're doing in Ukraine. There's a bloodbath overseas, but somehow, if you take on the drug cartel and you say use violence against the cartel. Oh, wait a minute. Those guys, they channel a lot of money under the surface, so we couldn't do that. But in any event, but it was interesting that the idea of taking military action against the cartels seems to have taken hold. And the article in The Hill said, Wednesday's Republican presidential primary debate found near unanimous consensus on the idea of using American military force to fight drug smuggling and migration. Then they said the strongest pledge for military action was by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. And he said he would use military force to take out fentanyl labs, to take out the drug cartel operations. He said, yes, I will do it on day one. So there's no doubt he's thought about this, he's prepared to do it, and he would do it. I believe what he's saying. Now, it is interesting. You have the people who are nervous Nellies about it. You've got John Negroponte, who served as a UN ambassador under George Bush. He was ambassador to Mexico under H.W. Bush and under Bill Clinton. And he says, oh my, we mustn't do this because Mexico is our largest trading partner. You think? We buy more fentanyl to kill Americans than you could imagine. It's their biggest export to the United States. Fentanyl narcotics coming across the border. The number two is human beings trafficked, sex trafficking. That is a massive problem in this country. And so anyway, Negroponte says Mexico is our largest trading partner. Says we share a 2,200-mile border with them, which is true. It's a porous border for all practical purposes. It's been erased by President Biden and the White House. And then they said, well, we cooperate on a spectrum of issues such as migration. Hello, I'm going to tell, if this is coordination with Mexico, then we may as well just hang it up because we don't have a border anymore. Trade, trade, environmental concerns. Well, we got all these people bringing garbage and dumping it on the southern border. But in any event, I think people are less and less impressed by the cooperation we get from Mexico, which is precious little. Now, there was not unanimous agreement on military force. This Governor Asa Hutchinson, who is sort of the far left of the Republican Party, he's opposed to using military or police within the boundaries of Mexico. And he cites his experience as head of the Drug Enforcement Administration. Well, Asa Hutchinson, if 100,000 deaths of fentanyl doesn't get your attention as the former head of DEA, then I don't know what will. Now, you also, interestingly, Mike Pence, who is kind of there's something sinister about the guy, but in any event, of course, he was the vice president under Trump. He lauded Hutchinson's appeal for economic pressure. He said he would engage Mexico the exact same way as the Trump administration, which means no military force in Mexico. In other words, it's sort of a crafty way of saying, no, I wouldn't use military force, but just saying, oh, I'd just do it like Trump did. The only reason that Trump didn't use military force is the corrupt cadre of generals and officials in the Department of Defense would not support it. And they just blocked it. So as we said before, and this has been quite a number of months since we discussed this, but The United States should make war on the cartels, and we should kill cartel soldiers. Now, the cartel soldiers are used to run drugs. They're used to uh, to uh, control the traffic of the foreign invasion coming in from all the third world countries being dumped into the United States. And we need to go after the cartel soldiers, and we need to kill them. We don't need to arrest them and have the FBI and all these silly agencies come and turn them loose on the street. We need to target them. We need to kill them. Now, I believe we should use drones, send drones over Mexico constantly, and where we find them, where we're able to detect the drug bosses, the drug lords, the heads of the organizations that send the foreign invasion across our border. We need to take them out with drone missiles. We've also got HIMARS artillery when we're talking about, within 45 miles or so of the Mexican border. We should use HIMARS to strike targets within Mexico. Right on the border, my deputy staff judge advocate, when I was at Fort Ord, I was the SJA for 7th Infantry Division. My deputy went to the border. He was actually assigned down there years ago. And he came back and he told me, he said, gosh, he says, with night vision equipment, we actually see them, we see the illegals boarding flatboats on the Rio Grande River, and we see individuals taking tickets. In other words, you have to prove that you paid to get on board, just like running a bus service, and you've got somebody going around taking tickets. Those people are agents of the cartel, and they should be targets. And we can have snipers on our side of the Rio Grande using night vision equipment and so forth. And where we see somebody who is organizing the people to come across, the snipers need to take them out. Just drop them right where they stand. That the individuals taking tickets for people, they need to be taken out. And when people flee from the boats, then we need to use artillery, go in, we need to hit the boats, take out the boats, destroy them so that they can't be used again. Now, one thing I never have understood, but when we intercept people coming across, now under Trump, we used to apprehend them. Now they're just given welfare and sent to a 5-star hotel somewhere. But we used to stop them. And what we should do when we do is, instead of turning them right across the border, we should find out which country they came from, and then we should transport them to the farthest point south in that country and drop them there. And we can notify the country and say, hey, look, we've got 500 people coming in, and they're going to be at the very southern border of Mexico because they're Mexican. Okay, that means that they have 2,000 miles to traverse to get back up to the Rio Grande instead of having 50 feet. And the same thing, there are people coming in from Haiti, for crying out loud. So those people should go back to Haiti. Other people should go to Venezuela, wherever it is. But none of this business is just putting them across the border. That's silly. Now, how do we provide the manpower to do this? We need to have at least 250,000 troops on the Rio Grande. Well, you might be surprised to realize that the United States has U.S. troops on 1,000 overseas bases. I actually had to look that up multiple times because I didn't believe it. We have 1,000 bases. Now, these are not necessarily huge bases, but it's just phenomenal. We need to pull all of these people back. We don't need an empire. We were very, very happy and prosperous and did well without having a vast empire. We need to bring troops back from those 1,000 overseas bases and defend our own borders, because right now we risk having a collapse of the United States, just like what happened to Rome, because the history of the rise and fall of the Roman Empire tells us that it was not an invasion that destroyed Rome. It was people just walking across the border. Well, what's happening to the American Republic? How is the American Republic on the verge of collapse? People walking across the border, just like they did in Rome. Okay, let me move on from there. I have a couple of other things if we have time. This was very interesting. You know, I'm very interested in what happened in Syria. Back in 2011, the United States started a war to overthrow Syria. We did it through the Central Intelligence Agency, where they staged provocations. There was this Arab Spring that certainly was coordinated by the CIA and MI6, British MI6, French intelligence, all these different. And because of one guy who committed suicide in Tunisia, all of a sudden, all of the Middle East rose up and were overthrowing governments. Well, it's a bunch of baloney. That's a massive intelligence operation by all these NATO countries. But in any event, as part of it, there were demonstrations, legitimate demonstrations that occurred in Syria in 2011. But within, and I've talked to individuals who are actually part of the demonstrations, and within a period of a couple of months, the demonstrations were totally dominated by Al-Qaeda. Now, over there, they used the name al-Nusra, but it was Al-Qaeda, the same group that brought down the Twin Towers and attacked the Pentagon on 9/11, killing 3,000 Americans and creating just massive panic in the country. That same group, the 13 individuals who flew hijacked the 4 planes and were all killed in the crashes. Those 13 people were members of Al-Qaeda. The United States, just 10 years later, used Al-Qaeda to topple the government in Libya in 2011, and in an attempt to topple the government in Syria in 2011. But in any event, you know, anytime we do these CIA operations overseas, they're always very covert. We conceal from the American people what we're doing. CIA exists principally to deceive the American people. Its principal objective should be to give honest intelligence to decision makers in the government and to the people of the United States. But it blocks all information from the people, and so much of it is just creative propaganda used to deceive the American people. But in any event, under President Obama, he said, well, Assad has to go. President Assad is the elected president of Syria. And but I created a firestorm by disclosing the fact that we were backing Al-Qaeda in an attempt to overthrow the legitimate, duly elected government of Syria. Well, I just found this interesting because you stumble over things as you do research. This is a a spot report, which is a government report, and it was sent from Jake Sullivan, who is now the National Security Advisor, but back at that time, let's see, I'm trying to think exactly what his position was, but anyway, he was assigned responsibility for Syria at that time. And so he's sending a spot report on what is taking place inside of Syria. And the date of it is February 12th, 2012. So the uprising in Syria had been going on for less than a year at this point. And so Jake Sullivan sends this spot report to Hillary Clinton, who was the Secretary of State at the time. And he sends a group of sort of intelligence reports, this is happening, but his personal assessment is very brief. And so it's sort of like, here's what's happening, and here are the details. So the important part is where he says, here's what's happening. And he says, see the last item. Al-Qaeda is on our side in Syria. So he's, hey, listen, Hillary, this is great news. We've got Al-Qaeda. We've got the Al-Qaeda terrorists who brought down the Twin Towers and the Pentagon, and they're on our side in trying to overthrow the duly elected legitimate government of President Assad in Syria. Isn't that a great thing? And so it just shows the depth of corruption of what we have been doing in Syria. And it goes on and on. We've sanctioned them. We've stolen all of their wheat lands by occupying northern Syria unlawfully with American troops. And but it's just interesting. You discover these things, and this is out of WikiLeaks, so it's an official, uncontested American document. No, not controversial whether it was issued or what it says. And here is Jake Sullivan telling Hillary Clinton, Secretary of State, Al-Qaeda is on our side in Syria. And throughout the war, the United States has been an unwavering supporter of Al-Qaeda in Syria. These are the people who killed 3,000 Americans on 9/11. And yet we have allied ourselves. To this very day, we funnel financial support. You, as taxpayers, are paying for Al-Qaeda, which brought down the Twin Towers on 9/11. Now, isn't that wonderful? Well, in any event, I found that very interesting. Here's just one last item that I'm going to hit, and then we'll close out. The World Bank has done various assessments, and based on numbers that they have published, Russia is now among the world's top 5 economies in terms of its gross domestic product, and it has overtaken Germany. Now, as you know, we sabotaged Germany's lifeline to natural gas, and we destroyed the Nord Stream pipelines by sabotaging them, and so it has thrown our ally, supposed ally, Germany, into a near recession because we cut off their supply of inexpensive natural gas. But in any event, the numbers that put Russia number 5 is based on purchasing power parity, which is sort of, what's money worth in Russia, what's money worth in Germany, in the United States. So it's actually a truer measure of the economic strength of a country. And what is interesting is that uh, President Biden had sort of said, we're going to turn the ruble to dust. It's not going to be worth anything. We're going to collapse their economy. All evidence points to the fact that the Russian economy, while it certainly has strains from all of the pressures put on it, it remains a very powerful, very resilient economy. And it's one of the reasons that the war in Ukraine is going to be lost by Ukraine. And it's sad that we've got a lot of people being killed for no reason in all of that. But in any event, that's a bit of a rundown on where we stand. Kind of exciting times. There's a lot of negative stuff that goes on, but at the same time, I can't help to think that we have a lot of things to be very hopeful about. I have no idea what's going to happen with the upcoming elections, because the front runner for the Republicans is supposedly going to be tied up in court. That's the plan. I have to think that at some point there's going to be a lot of pressure on the U.S. Supreme Court to say, look, our democracy, our system of government is potentially going to fail over this, because you've got a lot of people who want to vote for Donald Trump. If he becomes the nominee, then you're going to have one of the two presidential candidates who's tied up by these political prosecutions. I mean, if you can do that to him, you could do it to anybody, and you can simply put an end to elections in the United States. So we'll see what happens. I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy, but I'm optimistic about where we're going. I see positive things on the horizon for the culture. I think people are rejecting transgenderism. They're rejecting a lot of the LGBT stuff. They're saying, we're not into grooming. We're not into sexual grooming of children and making them more receptive to the advances of pedophiles. And so we're not too keen on this LGBT groomer stuff and this transgender grooming stuff. So we're starting to regain a little bit of our sanity there. The idea of calling boys girls and girls boys is just rubbish. But we're starting to come out of it, and that's encouraging. And also the fact that people are just not paying attention to these indictments. They're just saying, that's just politics, So hopefully something will come about, and we'll see. I'm not saying people should support Trump or DeSantis or somebody else. I'd be delighted with DeSantis or with Trump. I'm against people like Nikki Haley, Mike Pompeo, the ones whose careers are built on bloodshed and war. I'm sick and tired of them, would never support them. But in any event, we've got good things on the horizon. We'll see what happens. Things are moving fast. There'll always be something to talk about next week. Okay, God bless you, and thanks for joining us. I'm Senator Dick Black, former senator, and thank you for being with us for Focus on the News. We'll be back next Monday at 11.